You're listening to the Awakened Feminine podcast. I'm your host, 𝐊𝐿𝐿. Welcome. Each week, I'll be chatting with thought leaders from around the world as they share the love and wisdom they've picked up along the way in this journey called life. Whether it be their stories, lessons, tips, or expertise in the field, you'll be sure to get your weekly dose of inspiration and tools on how to lead a soul-aligned life. Let's go. I've got the beautiful Amanda Kate here with me. She is a self-mastery facilitator who flips the paradigms of what it means to be a master of self. And we talked about 9 months ago, and I'm so excited for our conversation because the Heroine's Journey, Pathway to Deeper Self-Understanding, that is a powerful, powerful teaser title that you gave us, and I'm excited to go down this journey. And as you know, it can go anywhere, but yeah, we're going to try and focus.
We'll see how we go. We know it can go anywhere.
Oh, yes, definitely. I know I've asked you this question before, but I still want to ask you this question because, as you know, the awakened feminine and the term and how it means, what it means to us, evolves all the time. So I'd love to ask you, what does the term awakened feminine mean to you in this moment, in this chapter of your life?
In this chapter, I think it's very much about, as much about honoring the divine masculine to be able to create the honored space for the feminine to be able to awaken. So making sure that that balance is truly there, because I think so often in this feminine journey, and I think we may have touched on it last time, we often go into this delving in the feminine, but we can't truly express her until our masculine is feeling safe to express in a healthy way and to hold space and not feel attacked and diminished and demeaned. And when we can have them both be in union and be healthy and be happy together and be working as a team, then we can express both of them in a beautiful, just synchronistic, team-led way. So yeah, so that's where I'm probably sitting right now.
I love that. I'm like getting full like goosebumps as you're talking. I'm like, oh, this is so yummy, because that is exactly what I've been finding in the last, little while that I took a break. About, 8 months since my last podcast, when I stopped my podcast. And it is that foundation, we always, bash the masculine. We need to have the feminine rising. And, I'm not talking about, physical body, but it's always like, we need our feminine energy rising. And most of the time, the thing is, our masculine energy has been so wounded. We're not actually co-creating with both the divine energies of both. Oh, yeah, this is so powerful. Okay, so
and we can't fully express our feminine until she feels safe. And so often what happens is the masculine's been the only one doing the work, so he's exhausted. And she's like, give me a go, let me out. And so often when we first dive into this journey, and there's no judgment in this, because trust me, I've done it hands up, I'm as guilty as the next party. When I first started expressing my feminine, it was at the exclusion of my divine masculine. And so everything that came up that was masculine was like, oh, go away. You've been doing this the whole time and you've been running the show and, all of this stuff. But imagine if you're the person, say, if all of a sudden you've been working really, really, really hard for, in my case, coming up 46 years, and all of a sudden you're told to sod off and we've got someone else coming through. How is that going to make you feel? And so when we exclude the masculine, he's like, but hang on, I've gotten you to where you are. And now you're, throwing me out with the bathwater to look at this other part of myself. And so I found that I did need to do that for a time. And a lot of people need to do that for a time to understand what their feminine is and how she can come into the world in that awakened way. And then it's like, hang on, there's a lot of this masculine that serves me. So how can I heal him so that he can create a beautiful container for me to express more of that feminine? And that's where I think we're all leading to in our feminine journey. It's just remembering that at some point we will need to bring them in to be a co-creative force and a union, rather than, hang on, you haven't got me where I need you to go, and therefore I'm going to try this way, not recognizing that we really do need to balance those two forces. So yeah, I just love it. Love it.
Mm. This question was popping in as you were talking. Why do you think we have just pushed our feminine to the side for so long? Why have we all been operating on this masculine energy? And the thing is, we've been operating on masculine energy, but a lot of it has been also the wounded masculine. So we've had this wounded masculine running the show. I mean, obviously, it's helped us get to where we are or were before we decided, the feminine needs to come out. But, what has happened to us that we're just purely being running so much on the masculine?
Well, it's funny. This is actually a perfect segue into the heroine's journey, but I'm going to just push that to one side just for a little bit to give a bit of historical context. Because I think we need to understand the history of this to understand where we are now and how we've gotten there. And a lot of it has been because back, what was it, about 4,000 years ago, roughly. And there's a fabulous book on this called The Great Cosmic Mother, which gives the history of how the feminine was suppressed. It is not an easy read. It probably took me about 18 months to get through it, maybe even longer, because it is very historical. It is very gosh, it's a lot. But what it does is it shows that obviously back, when we were in this matrifocal, so people think we went from matriarchy to patriarchy. That's not quite true. We went from matrifocal societies where it was children in the middle. If you imagine like the circles, there were children in the middle. The women were around that and the men were around that. So the men did look to the women for the guidance, and the women helped look after the children, who were obviously the next generations. And a lot of ancient tribal cultures still use that way of being. The men were there to protect, the women were there to kind of create all the order and do all of the, the caretaking and the finding out what plants you could eat and what were medicinal and all of those sort of gathering bits. And then the children were sort of protected by the whole. And then obviously, it was really interesting. Women, because of the way things were, never necessarily knew who they got pregnant by. So men didn't know whose children were whose, and the children were then assigned a community father. But obviously, men are getting to this point where obviously the ones who were getting the breeding rights had certain characteristics, and the ones without were a bit like, hang on a minute. And there was this, and the goddess was seen as the figure that you honored. She taught about the cycles of the year. Women's bodies taught about the cycles of the year, what crops to plant, when, how to do it. It was just this cyclical, feminine-driven way of being. But there's not much control and power in that. And so when you don't have control and power, and when that's in your light, it is fabulous qualities to have. When it's not in the light, when it's more in the shadow, it becomes manipulative, controlling, power hungry, all of those things that we expect. Now, what happened was God got separated from us. He was put up in a cloud in a white dress, rained down fire and brimstone, and ruled with fear. There was a lot of fear-based stuff. If you don't do this, then this will happen. If you aren't pious, and all of those lessons that we all know. So I'm not going to go through all of the things. But that separation from God, and for us to get to God then, instead of communing directly with the goddess, we had intermediaries. We had the priests and the bishops and all these different people put between us and God. And then the church was imposing the taxes and, basically raping and pillaging their own societies so that they had more of the power. And women were kept out of the church, and women were kept out of universities, and women were kept out of all of this and put as second-class citizens. And through this time, and again, this is not dismissing the masculine, it's about the patriarchal system, which is about power over, it is about control, it is about ruling through fear. You look at any marketing, and it goes on these principles. You will not be enough until you have this thing, and only I can provide that thing. That is patriarchal society in a nutshell. So we are always looking for that next thing to fix us, to complete us, to get us up the next rung of the ladder. And for me to get to that next rung of the ladder, I need to pull you off the ladder and stomp on you and push you down the ladder, because the ladder's only so wide. And so it becomes about competition and power over, rather than this. I look at it as kind of a global 3D model where we're all in different stages of learning. Sometimes we're at the top, sometimes we're at the bottom. I know a lot about what I know about, and you know a lot about what you know about, and we can both teach each other and learn from each other. And so there's, sometimes I'm the teacher, sometimes you're the teacher, and it kind of comes in all of these different roles. And, I'm not an accountant. I need an accountant. And in that sense, they are more superior to me, but there are other ways that I am. So we're actually all on an equal playing field and an even playing field. And that's really kind of, I guess, the way it all got set up, was actually, instead of communing with our highest powers, we were separated from us. And you can tell, because if you ask people, where's God? A lot of people will be, he's up there. He's in, on my chair, sorry. He's up there. He's outside of me. He's up in a cloud. He's, and then those people who've done a lot of work tend to go, he's in here. He's everywhere. And I don't mean that. That's obviously my religious conditioning to use even that gendered term, it, as that powerful universal source, presence, infinite wisdom, creator of the universe, or creatrix of the universe. That essence is in all of us, and it is in everything. But when we go into this model where there is one source of power, and it chooses what is right, what is wrong, how everything should be or shouldn't be, and you either get punished or rewarded as a result, that's where this setup's come from. And so we are all swimming in that water. And until we start poking bits of ourselves out of that water, we don't know we're wet, because it's just what we're swimming in. And that's really, I guess, what's set up where we are now, and why we dismiss the feminine and all of those feminine dark aspects, the emotions and the feelings and the intuition and all of those things that, couldn't be studied until recently, couldn't be understood until recently. And we're at the, very beginning of starting to understand physiologically, neurologically, how all of this stuff actually can be measured. But because it can't be seen to be measured, it's again dismissed and thrown out. And so if you're brought up and born into those structures, that's just the way things are. And so we do tend to over-identify with those patriarchal forms, which is the wounded masculine, to survive. And we're all built to survive. We're all built for safety. And I think that's really important, because every unresourceful behavior we have has basically just been there to keep us safe and to keep us alive until the next day. And because we are tribal creatures, because we are born to be in community, we have that need for acceptance and belonging, even if it means that we cut bits off ourselves to fit in, to be accepted and to belong to something, because we know on our own we die. We can't survive. And so all of that kind of comes into why we dismiss the feminine as being bad and dark and negative. And, the witch trials were not about, getting rid of witches. It was getting rid of that divine feminine and all of those qualities. And all of those things through history have been a way to build the control over rather than the communion and co-creation with.
Wow.
Mm.
You are so knowledgeable. I'm like listening to you going, wow, tell me more, tell me more. Yeah. And, everything that you talked about, it just all makes so much sense, in how we are in our society today. And now seeing that feminine rising. And in the last few years, especially since, I found since the pandemic started, it's been this acceleration of women or feminine, not, I won't say women, the feminine energy rising. It doesn't have to be,
Yeah.
particular gender.
Mm.
And what I found though is when we talk about patriarchy, right? People are like, it's men. But yeah, okay, whilst maybe back in the day, it kind of maybe started off in that way, but we all, all genders had a part to play in then conforming and continue to build those systems. So it's not men, but now we're all like, men are the worst, and it's women rising and all that kind of stuff. And so
how do you think that makes our masculine feel? This is that macro micro, reflection. Again, we're going, oh, it's men that are the problem. Well, hang on a minute. It's not. It's patriarchy and that's why I like to make that really clear distinction between the masculine and patriarchy, because under patriarchy, every single person suffers. Even those who are at the top and controlling all of the shit, all of it. Everyone is suffering because of this. And that's, I think, and I love that you've kind of, gone into that, because I think it's such an important part to understand.
Yes, so important. And because, like what you mentioned before, we need both our masculine and feminine energies to be co-creating together for things to work. You can't have the full feminine flow. Like you said, I mean, I've been there. I was very in the masculine energy, to get to where I was in my career. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the feminine is rising. And I just went fully the other way. And I was like, this isn't quite working for me, because I'm just like, let's just flow.
Yeah.
But
how much stuff gets done when you're just in that?
Yeah, true. But there is, the action part is the masculine, right? But we are flowing in the masculine. Okay, well, we have to get this done. But then it's like being consciously aware of, oh, right, actually, the masculine's actually helping us, even though we're like going, oh, there's still that, help there. So how do we then, I think this probably maybe segues into it as well. How do we get ourselves to actually recognize consciously to work with both energies in the divine state?
I think that this has been, this is part of the journey, I think, for anyone who is awakening, regardless of, gender or identity or any of those things. Like, it actually doesn't matter. If we are waking up, we are starting to look at how are we operating in this world. And realistically, for me, that becomes that single focus. And that's why I went to self-mastery, I guess, as my descriptor, because it's not about what I do, although I do work on that every day. That is my top value, is self-mastery. The more I understand myself, the more I can understand other people, the more empathy and compassion I have for my traumatic, unresourceful parts, the more empathy and compassion I can have for other people, because I recognize that in their reactions or their reactivity or whatever you want to call it, they also are operating from this place of conditioning and trauma and worldview and all of this sort of stuff. And so for me, self-mastery, yeah, okay, people go, well, self-mastery must be selfish. It's about me understanding myself and my own conditioning and my, that wider thing of this human psychology and energy and all of those different parts to filter into how do I operate most efficiently and effectively in this world. And I think if we take it back to that, we naturally start to learn about balancing the two together, because we're taking it almost pre-feminine and masculine into that oneness of how do I make people's lives better? How do I make my life better? How do I live in a more aligned way? And so I love, I guess, turning it into just that question about, well, what am I doing to add to this or to take from this? Because that naturally sort of gets me into this flow of, where am I giving too much? Where am I taking too much? Where are things out of balance and out of kilter? And so, there's a couple of bits that this sort of leads me to think about. One is the fact that, we're taught to be selfless and, we've got to give everything to other people. And then we also have this thing about talking now so much about overwhelm and burnout. Well, let's look. Overwhelm and burnout is a result. It is not the cause. It's a symptom. Why are we feeling overwhelmed and burned out? Usually because we're not looking after ourselves. Usually because we're putting everybody else's needs ahead of our own. Usually because we are stuck in that wounded, masculine, patriarchal, striving, hustle culture, pushing, not resting, not allowing our replenishment, just giving, 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 giving out. Everything's going outwards. And so when we start to look at overwhelm and burnout, and this is the thing that annoys me when most people talk about it, is you can talk about overwhelm and burnout and how to fix it, but realistically, until you know what's driving it, what of your belief systems are driving you to being in that state? What of your conditioning is driving you? What of your traumas are driving you? Which parts of you are, sitting on your back, whipping you forward when you're just like, I just need to stop? And so we get into that. And I think that's a really important part to really start to understand. And that's where I like to look at sort of the problems that are leading to the problem, because usually the problem we're focused on is not the problem at all. We need to go a few levels deeper to go to that kind of almost root cause, to be able to then go, oh, that's actually what's driving this. This isn't, the root cause at all. This is just a symptom of something much deeper.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And when you were talking, it just reminded me of a conversation I recently had with a girlfriend. She's at that, overwhelmed, stressed, burnout stage, and her doctor prescribed her, like, you just need to just stop working. Like, so she got 5 weeks off.
Mm.
And of course, I was the same when I stopped my podcast and everything last year. It was uncomfortable to not do anything. But the problem is when you go to the doctors and they say, okay, you just need to take time off and rest, but you still don't look at your shit. When you go back to work, it's still the same, right? So then...
because the structure and foundation hasn't changed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then when I met up with her recently, it was interesting because she's like, yeah, but I know, like, yeah, I can do nothing, but then the things are still going to be there for me to look at. Like, it was still, there was still no recognition of, I actually need to look at my shit. Because, okay, I totally understand, like, when you do nothing, there's still the things there, but it's like consciously being aware, like, what is actually important? Why have I been so burnt out, stressed, overwhelmed? Because of, like what you said, this and this and this, that's driving and programming me. Because until I look at that, it's just going to be a constant perpetual cycle. But it's just so interesting because now that I'm aware of it, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, I still have, things still come up. Constantly keeps coming up. But
Yeah.
but we can't have this approach, like you say, where we just go, okay,
Mm.
well, you just need to stop, you know, and rest.
Yeah. It's a
And
Band-Aid.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a Band-Aid, but you're not looking at what caused the harm in the first place.
yeah. And I think also a lot of people think, oh, okay, it's work, right? Oh, my boss is bad. It's because I'm working too much and putting too much effort into work. Why are you doing that? Why you
Yeah.
keep getting bad bosses? Why do you keep working too much?
Mm.
Why do you keep putting all the effort in? Like, what is going on? Like, way
Yeah.
back behind the scenes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And what in my childhood has led to that? Was I brought up in a I don't know, a family where I had overly critical parents who I was always trying to please. And so therefore people pleasing has become my default, way of being. And therefore when I go into a job, all I'm trying to do is fix everything for everybody and make everybody happy. And it's all outside ourselves rather than looking at what do I need? What is actually my responsibility here? Which parts can I control? Which parts do I want to do? What do I love? How many people do not have hobbies these days? It's one of the biggest thing I see in male clients. No hobbies. And I'll say to them, just go try stuff. I can tell you now, the ones who have gone and tried stuff and found hobbies have had much better results because they've now got something apart from work that identifies them.
Mm, I love that. I want to talk a bit about male. That you said you had male clients because I interview mostly women. I do have interviewed a few men, and we're talking about the
Mm.
feminine rising and all that. How does it present in men? Because I would really love to know the other side of the coin, because we always just talk about women, how we need to, have that feminine. But what about, how does it come out in men? I really would love to know, like, what you've seen so that we can understand that
I
this is a
often
universal problem. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I often find that it comes out in those workaholic type behaviors because that becomes the identity. And so if they're not doing well at work, everything falls to pieces. And then the pressure they put the pressure on the external because they're not succeeding, whatever that means, at work. And so therefore there's a lot of that pushing and striving. And then I see it in that over controlling domination type thing. And so allowing that feminine to come up and balance that out so that they can learn, when do I surrender? When do I actually not need to fight? What else can I do? Can I bring play and fun into my life? How many men have things that they just love doing? And this is why a lot of men will go and have a couple of beers or have a few drinks or whatever it is, or go and put some money on the horses or the dogs, or they tend to end up with these less healthy outlets because that's what's been societally acceptable before. You walk through some streets in Europe and there's men having coffee and catching up, and there's a real sense of community, or they're playing chess, or there are these ways that men are allowed to commune and be with one another outside of some of those unhealthy ways of being. Whereas you look, even those men who say like fishing, they'll often go out on the boat and have a few beers. And there's always seemed to be this slightly unhealthy way of doing it because that's then a more societally acceptable way for them to have this hobby. Whereas if they just had a hobby for hobby's sake, whatever that may be, then it does change things massively because it becomes this over identification of my work is my worth. And what I do for a living is all that defines me. And there's a lot of, pressure still on men, even though things are getting better in some ways, there is still this pressure on them to be providers, to provide for others. And that brings its own stresses. We have other stresses in our life that, of child rearing and of running homes and all of that kind of thing. But it's a really hard job to be expected to provide. It's a lot of pressure.
Mm.
And then when your work, say, maybe isn't going so well, you feel stuck because, again, we're not, they're not encouraged to share their feelings and emotions. They're not encouraged to tap into rest. They're not encouraged to go and play. They're not encouraged to do those sorts of things because as women have this narrow band of acceptable behavior that they're supposed to follow, so do men. Everybody has these societal expectations, and it's tough because we should be all able to express the fullness of who we are and tap into all of those different emotions that we have. And yet there are restrictions on everybody. And that's, I guess, what I see. So it's very similar problems, just slightly different skews on it.
It actually does sound very similar to what women have to go through, but we just, don't really get the men's perspective very often at all,
Yeah.
or if at all,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
not a lot of men that come out and would go, talk about it in that way, Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. Thank you. Um,
Mm.
let's talk about the heroine's journey because I want to we kind of went, oh, that's a great segue, and then I think I just kind of went, oh,
Yeah.
let's go over here.
That's
Let's kind
fine. Always,
of
as we know, it
yeah,
always leads perfectly.
let's go back to the
Yeah.
heroine's journey, and what you gave for the teaser title was the heroine's journey: pathway to deeper self-understanding. I want to know why that is so important for you that you're like, let's talk about this, Kaki.
Do you know, I was learning about this. I've known about it for probably the last 4 years, but it wasn't really until last May that it really hit me, like a ton of bricks hit me, that that's what I'd been navigating for the probably 2 years before last May. And once, because we're not supposed to see things until we're ready to see them. And then it was like, boom, it all became super clear. There's a number of different ways that we can look at it. But what I realized is this was my next, or I'd been on this path already of mothering in a different way, learning to partner in a different way, learning about myself in a different way, learning about how I'd been conditioned in a different way. And like I say, when it hit me that that's what I'd been walking and navigating, it was another unraveling that I then had to do more work on to go, oh, this is what I've been in, this is what I've been doing. How do I now fully integrate this so it becomes wisdom, not knowledge? Although because I'd been implementing it without knowing I was implementing it, that integration bit, once the realization happened, wasn't quite as long. But it was crazy, like some of the stuff that I was being faced with and the way I was responding. There was this part of me watching at the times that these things were going down, going, every cent you have invested in this is paying off in this moment. Holy crap. It was just amazing. And then once I realized that that's what I'd been navigating, I then obviously had to deal with the grief and all of the different floods of emotion that were coming. But it felt like a shorter period because I'd already been walking the path for so long. It was just the integration part that I needed to do. So, yeah, I don't know if that quite answers it, but it really has allowed me to slightly shift the way I interact with my partner, with my children, with myself, and to honor and acknowledge where I am and where I've been and how then I approach things that do come in that challenge me. it's changed everything.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked about like why it's important to you. Can you share about like the can you share a bit more details? Like I want to know like maybe some
Yes.
examples of like what it looked like to get to that point of going, oh,
Well, how about I outline the heroine's journey and then we can kind of go from there, because I think that will really help for people to understand. So the first step of the heroine's journey is that shift from feminine to masculine, which is what we've talked about. We sort of see when we're younger that the way that we're being as feminine creatures is not encouraged by society. Don't cry, soldier on, pull up your bootstraps, get on with it. You know, you're not hurt, there's no blood, you're fine. You know, anger's not okay, so go to your room. I don't want to see your anger. I don't want to see any expression of anything other than this. Unless you are being the perfect child, I don't want you near me. So we get rejected for these feminine traits. So we learn to suppress and hide them, of course, because they're not socially acceptable. So sometimes this happens with an actual distancing from our mother. Sometimes it's just that traditional, female societal roles. There's lots of different ways that it comes, but oftentimes it's a denial of part of ourself. But what happens is we kind of resent this femininity within us because we feel that it's inferior. We're taught that it's inferior. We're taught that the way to get out in life is to succeed and make money and compete with others and win and all of this. And we've got to compare our performances, and we've got to beat the competition. And we learn not to honor that part of ourselves and to suppress and hide it. So then what we do is we identify with the masculine. So we start to go, well, all of this stuff is really wrong and bad and I shouldn't express it. But this is the way we're supposed to be in society. So sometimes that is where women turn more into that masculine, or, well, a lot of people turn more towards those masculine values. Sometimes it can be the more traditional male societal roles. Sometimes it can be over attachment to the father. It can be in lots of different ways that we do this. But the masculine represents our freedom from that feminine. So we are no longer this negative, bad stuff. We are this good stuff that society ticks boxes for and says, well done, you, and here's a gold star. And so, but often what happens when we start to display these more masculine traits, we get praised for our strength, but we know we're inferior because of our femininity. So there's this juxtaposition that's coming. We're getting praised for all of this stuff, but you're still not good enough because you're still not that. And so the masculine or patriarchal aspect is seeking that control, power, and perfection. And we can never be perfection because we have these feminine traits within us. And again, everyone has feminine traits in them. So then we go through the road of trials, which is similar to in the hero's journey, where we're tested with our ordeals for our character development and all of that. Often these ones, though, are about our higher status, about success, about empowerment, about, gaining status. Although the difference is in the hero's or in the heroine's journey, instead of it being more of those physical outer worldly road of trials that we tend to go through in our hero's journey, where our conflict comes with the fact that we have this need for dependency, for love. We're feeling inferior. We've got all of this internal conflict going whilst we're chasing that external success. And so there's this disconnect between inner world and outer world. Hang on, I have all these big feelings, but I'm not allowed to show them because that makes me less than. And so it's like we're continually discounting this part of us that makes us us and makes us whole. So what happens is we often get this external impressive persona. We are successful at school, or we've done really well at uni, or we've got a great job, and then what happens is we get that illusory boon of success. So in the hero's journey, we get the boon of success, which is like we go, yeah, I've faced that road of trials and I've come out the victor. In the heroine's journey, we're like, okay, we've overcome the obstacles, but in doing so, I've betrayed myself. I've betrayed my values. I've got all these limitations in my new life. I've sacrificed my soul. I'm feeling estranged from, my inner world. I'm feeling oppressed. And often we don't understand why we're having all these feelings. There's this real sense of disconnect of going, I've got all this stuff. Like I've ticked all the boxes. And this is what I've got. Like something feels wrong. And that's why they call it the illusory boon of success. So then we sort of realize that, hang on, we've been doing all this masculine stuff to date, but I'm not happy. And we go into crisis, which can look a million different ways in your own lifetime, let alone between people. Sometimes what really sparks this is that big crisis point, the death of a loved one, or a loss of identity, illness, divorce, all of those big things that can happen in life. Sometimes it's just losing a job. I shouldn't say just losing a job. Sometimes it's losing a job. Sometimes there's something that happens. But what then happens is we start to explore this inner world. Why have I created the life I have? We start asking questions. The descent comes from lots of different spiritual texts, but I liken it to the story of Inanna, who is one of the goddesses, and she went into the underworld to find her sister. But at every of the 7 levels, she had to strip bare. So she was a princess. So, she stripped off her crown at one level. She stripped off her cloak. Basically, by the time she gets to the inner world, she's completely naked. There's nothing left. And that's the descent that we go on, is literally to realize that we need to strip off everything. We need to tear ourselves apart. We need to just be bare, naked, vulnerable, smushy little messes. But it's part of that. And then what we often do is we meet some kind of figure, whether it be in real life, whether it be in text, whether it be in a movie, something then inspires us to go, hang on, there is this goddess figure, or there is this woman who seems to have it together. She can have this inner world and this outer world in marriage together. Oh my God, this is so inspiring. And I've had multiple teachers, thank God, in this realm who have taught me healthy nurturing and that balance between the masculine and feminine that has been completely and utterly inspiring. But what they do is they possess and express all of these beautiful, positive parts of femininity. And they show us in so many ways what we've abandoned within ourselves and inspire us to explore and return to what's within us. We then go through this period of yearning to reconnect. So it's like there's this part of our old life we want. We miss that, young, fun part of us who had not a care in the world. And even though she had lots of cares in the world, but there's kind of this way of yearning for our old life, but also knowing we can't go back. Because we know that at that point we were disconnected from all this stuff that we've just found. And so there's a little bit of this, I can see my old values and my traits, but I've now got this new perspective on it. It doesn't quite gel and fit. And so this is often where we end up reconnecting with the feminine in a much deeper way. Sometimes it might actually be a reconciliation with our actual mother. Sometimes it can be joining women's circles, or for me, I've got a lot of female friends who are older. I've got a lot of female mentors, and they all kind of came in and gave me that path into my new life, my new, more balanced, more whole expression of self. Then we tend to go through a bit of another crisis, and we really have to then, and so that bit that I've just discussed, the descent and meeting with the goddess and the yearning for reconnect, is often where we go on that first feminine embodiment journey, where we're like, to hell with the masculine, the feminine's the way to go. And, we go all, sunshine and rainbows and unicorn farts and, all of that, unbridled, uncontained feminine. But when we go through this next crisis, it's like, we've ignored our masculine now for too long. We need to bring him back up. We need to understand the positive as well as the negative of what he's done for us. And we need to then, and that's really when we take back our power, because we start to see him in his full glory. And we understand that the reason he's often been so unresourceful is because of his training, and because he's overworked and he's over relied on and he's exhausted and he's all of those things. And so as we start to take back that power, we start to really embrace and embody those positive aspects of masculinity. And we can then embrace our truth more and start to speak more into our authority, because we've got this beautiful container that feels safe. Because that's something that is so vital for us. The masculine often ends up feeling unsafe because he's trying to keep the feminine shut up and in your corner, because with you out, we're not accepted. We're excluded. And so he's been trying to keep us safe by keeping her down. And he needs some work done too, so that he realizes that this union is okay, that we can co-create together. And that it doesn't mean he is lesser or she is lesser. It means that they've both got different strengths. They've both got different qualities that we can use. And that reconciliation with the masculine is it can be a really divine process when we start to trust him again, when we start to say, honey, we need you. We need you. And you have so much to offer us. And you can help us become these wild, awakened, feminine creatures, because you give us a safe container in which to do it. You give us structure in which to bring it to the world. You give us platforms on which we can use our voice. So it becomes, the black and the white and the black. And finally is the divine union, where the conscious and subconscious really start to align and merge together. So there is no separation. It's that divine masculine and feminine are working in union. We find more balance. We're able to embrace our work that we need to do to maintain this integration. We can recognize when we are out of balance, because we've got the awareness that, oh, hang on, I've been way too much in my masculine. I need to dial that back a little bit. He's going into some old patterns, or she's going into some old patterns of just being wild and carefree and whatever the hell I want to do. Hang on, darling. You need a bit more containment right now. Rest is great, but, I think you're taking it to an extreme now. And, it's sort of that beautiful balance. And so that really is that outline of the heroine's journey. The other way that I really like to visualize the heroine's journey, and this is one of the hardest ones that I have navigated myself on multiple occasions with multiple people. So I love that broader overview. But looking at Jesus on the cross. So we all carry the cross of our own destruction on our backs. Yes, most of the time somebody else nails us to them, but we have carried that. They can't nail us to something that we haven't carried, and some things will stick for you that won't stick for me, and vice versa. So we all carry that cross of our destruction. We then get hung on it through some event, crisis, whatever it is. And we do tend to die on that cross. Part of us dies on that cross. We do need help getting off that cross. So whether that be, therapy, coaching, some kind of crisis and retrieval, we get taken off that cross. And that's when we go into our cave. And funny that we're talking about this on Easter.
I know. I was like, what is
perfect
happening?
timing. we go into our cave, we lick our wounds, we do our healing, and then, we become reborn with all of those integrations, with all of that knowledge, with all of that healing intact. The part that we do not talk about in this story of Jesus on the cross, because again, why would we? This is the feminine part of the journey. There were people who stayed with him whilst he was hanging on his cross. Mary Magdalene, his lover, and Mother Mary, his mother, stood with him the whole way. They watched him hang on his cross. They watched him be abused by the crowd and further tortured by the crowd, and, watching him being stoned and having the crown of thorns and jeered and all of that. And they stood there and they held space for him as he suffered, knowing that they, as much as they wanted to, they could not run up and take those nails out and save him. They had to let him go down his own path of destruction. And they just had to love him through it. And then while he was in the cave, Mary Magdalene basically sat vigil. And she was the first person he showed himself to when he arose. She was there the whole time, loving him and holding space for him. Now, we need to do this for our children. They carry their own crosses and they will be hung on them. And our job is not to save them. Our job is to love them. And I can tell you from experience, it is the hardest thing to do. But one of the things I have repeatedly said to my children as they've been hanging on the cross is, I trust you. I know you know how to navigate this. I know you can do this. And I know in your heart you've got this. And what I've seen from them since I've been in that space is the most incredible growth. Sorry. The most incredible growth and sprouting and blossoming. And it was hard as hell. And I was like, you know what, guys, tap me in. I'm waiting for you to tap me in. Mama Bear is there, but it's not my job. And I know you can do this. Now, me telling them that they can do it, that I trust them, that they know in their hearts what they can do to give them that knowledge and power and go, honey, I am here and I will not leave you. And I am your safe place to fall. And when things get shit, I will wipe your wounds and clean you up and look after you. But you've got this. And I remember this is one of those times that, and it's happened too many times in the last few years, but as I've stood there and I've been saying this, I'm like, fucking good job, mama. Like, I've just had this part of me. But there's this part of me watching myself like, holy shit, you have done the work. You're not rushing in to pick them up and dust them off like they're little babies anymore, because you know they don't need that. They need to know that you trust them and that you've got them and that you're holding them and that you're there for them regardless. I've also been in that space with my partner with some of his challenges. So I've been standing in both Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary. And that was really when my breakdown happened in May, was recognizing that I'd been standing in both Mary's spaces in different ways, basically for 18 months, nearly 2 years. And that was really when my breakdown happened, because I was like, holy shit, no wonder I'm exhausted. Like, I'm doing this and running a business and trying to keep my own shit together and trying to do my own work. And also I'm holding all this space. But the power and the growth I have seen in those people that I've held the space for without fixing, it has been, like, there's no words for what it's given me and for what it's given them. And that is the power that we have within us. When we honor our feminine, in the light. And it's life-changing for everyone involved. It really is. So, yeah. Anyway, nice tears for her.
I know. Oh, thank you.
Oh,
I should have learned from
yeah.
last week when I was like crying on on the podcast. I'm like, I don't have my tissues here, and today I'm like, damn it, I didn't put the tissue box back. Oh, but thank you.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful,
Absolute pleasure.
beautiful story, and thank you for your vulnerability. That makes thank you. And
Yeah, it's
just
huge.
everything you shared is just so powerful. And I love that, you bring it back to the story of the cross, which, like you said, we're Easter. It's just
I
somehow.
actually almost forgot it was Easter, and then all of a sudden I'm like, holy crap, yeah.
I know. I was
Perfect timing. Because we're in the middle of it.
Yeah. But
yeah.
whew,
Yeah.
how
It's a massive journey.
it is such a massive journey, and it's just so fascinating that is what each of us is here to learn in this lifetime. And some people do learn, and when you go on that heroine's journey, it is hard. Like you said, it is not.
Give me a hero's journey any day.
Yeah. It is not for the faint-hearted.
True story. I'll take those road of trials.
Yeah. Like when you were saying that you do miss, I'm like, I just wish I was like back there, because life was so much easier because I didn't need to look at my stuff. But when you do and you're on the other side of it, and the heroine's journey, I think also it's not linear. And
no. And this is the thing. It is. I think it's beautiful that you picked that up, because the hero's journey, the steps, it is linear because it's masculine, it's external. Think about the first bit in the hero's journey. It's a call to adventure. That's external. And we're going out and we're slaying the dragons and the ogres and the, demons in the external world. In the heroine's journey, we need to slay our inner dragons, ogres, demons. Whew. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah. And the thing is, those demons, ogres, and dragons sometimes reappear. Or there's new ones.
Oh, yeah.
And you're like, why? I just slayed one just recently. Why is there another one with two heads now instead of one?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think that is a really important thing to do, or to recognize, is just because we've gotten through one. I mean, think of how many different facets your life has. You're a wife, you're a mother, you're a podcast host, you're an employee, employer, you're a published author, you're, doing this collaborative book. You've got so many different things, and each part of your life will be at a different stage in both the hero's and heroine's journey, because we can't have one without the other. And so when you think of how many you're kind of navigating simultaneously, it's in every area of your life. So you might have just slayed a few inner dragons when it comes to your relationship, and then all of a sudden your kid wakes up and you're like, whoa, there's some more.
Oh, children give us so many demons and dragons to slay. It's like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to think we gave them.
Oh, but they are such a gift, even though sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Why am I here? But they give us the best gift of helping us recognize those parts of us that we don't love or push aside. And they are such a big part of the heroine's journey. If you have children, if you don't, obviously there's still a lot of things that would come up. But
oh yeah,
Oh, thank you, Amanda. I'm just checking the different channels. We've got a few people watching on like Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn, but we don't have anyone in the studio. So, no live questions for us today.
That's all right.
Yeah, but oh my gosh, such a beautiful, beautiful conversation with you today. I'm just like so honored that you wanted to come back to my podcast and chat with me.
Anytime. I love the
And
conversation you bring in.
yeah, and just the powerful insights and knowledge that you have. Just thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's all I can really express right now. Um, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. The first one being, what would you like? What is the biggest takeaway you want our audience to have from our conversation today?
It's to be willing to explore that inner landscape. Just asking really simple questions. You know, why might I be doing that? Why might that reaction have been what it is? What's my inner voice saying? You know, just really simple questions. You know, if you're feeling overwhelmed and burned out, well, what actions led to that? What was driving those actions? Because that's really when we start to look for the problem before the problem, that's when we start to go a little bit deeper and we start to see some of the thought patterns, the emotions, the behaviors that are then leading to the symptoms that we're having. So I think just going that tiny little bit deeper, and it's really simple little, like I say, really simple little questions. And you don't need to be thinking about all the complicated questions. Sometimes the simple questions are the most healing. What was driving that? What was I feeling in that moment? Really simple.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. And I did say just two more questions, but when you when you were talking about that, another one popped in, asking. I think for a lot of people, sometimes you, like you say, is a big events that push us down to go into the depths and into the underworld, like Anana, the goddess. But for people who are like, oh, I do want to explore and I, want to know more, but they're too scared. Like what I said about my friend, I know why she hasn't gone to look at her shit. There's no judgment. Everyone's
Yeah.
journey is different.
Yeah.
But, what's something that might help them to kind of nudge them to actually go and explore, because it is not, like as we said before, it's not for the faint-hearted, but it is so, so, so necessary.
Yeah. I think everything starts with kindness and compassion for self. Do you know what? Before I even look at doing the work, can I love myself even though I was just a bitch to my partner? Can I love myself even though I had too many glasses of wine last night? Can I love myself because I ate too many Easter eggs or hot cross buns? Can I be kind and compassionate to myself when I've done some of the shitty things that I've done? Because as we build that kindness and compassion, then it naturally starts to lead us into, I wonder why I did that. Oh, why did I eat too many hot cross buns again? Oh, because they're only out once a year. Oh, is that really the thing? Am I trying to hide emotions or suppress something, or just start out, like I say, it's the simple questions, but starting with that kindness and compassion to self. Can I love myself even when I'm not that perfect person who should be out in the world? Because that will, even with that, we're going to get forward motion.
Whew, thank you so much. That's such beautiful, message and advice or to take home, to take with us from this conversation? And I mean, so much to take away from this conversation. I just can't even, like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's like amazing. So thank you. Like I said, Amanda, like today, I'm just, all I really can say, and I know you probably feel it, is just, big, big, big thank you to you for this beautiful conversation. If people want to find out more about you, how they can work with you, where is the best place to find you? Where do you like to hang out usually?
So I always just suggest go to my website. It's 𝐴𝐴mandaKate.com.au, and all my social links are there, and you can sign up to my newsletter and my books there and all the rest of it. So it's easy enough to then reach out and find me.
Thank you very much, Amanda. It's been wonderful having you back, and whenever you feel the call to come back, you are always welcome with open arms to come back and have these wonderful conversations with me, me with you. So thank you once again, and thank you for everyone who's tuning in, and we shall see you all on the next episode.
And thank you so much, 𝐿𝐴𝐵𝐾𝐞, for all the work you're bringing into the world, because you're just a shining light and we need you as well. So thank you to you.
Thank you, Amanda.